I would also say, it's not the end all be all. Like if you're not quite financially ready to retire and all you think about is retirement because you hate your job, maybe look for a new job. And I know that's not
Right.
that easy, especially as you get older and there's ageism and things like that in the workplace. But, I do think that, if you're not happy in your job, there are other opportunities out there, and maybe it's not in the same capacity, maybe it's not in the same field, but I do believe you're never too old to reinvent yourself. And so I would think about that too if you're not quite ready to retire.
Welcome to another Finishing Strong podcast. If you haven't joined us before, Finishing Strong is dedicated to helping people transition from working full-time to something else and to integrate their faith with their new purpose. I'm excited today to be joined by Jeannie Thompson. I came across Jeannie last summer on TikTok, and she's just got this great series of TikToks that she's recorded for the last couple of years, and begins many of them with, if you are recently retired or thinking of retiring, you need to hear this. And then with contagious enthusiasm, she goes on and with great humor and perspective, shares many of the stories and experiences that she had in retiring 2 years ago. She took an early retirement from Fidelity, where she was a very successful executive, appeared on numerous business shows that we've all heard of, and yet she took the opportunity to take an early retirement and really struggled in those first few years, in those first few months of that retirement. So she gets a chance to share what she learned, what she's doing now, and I think you're really going to enjoy our time together. So join me in welcoming Jeannie Thompson. So, Jean, thanks so much for taking time to join me on the Finishing Strong podcast today. It's good to meet you, and good to see you here live and in person.
Yeah, it's great to be here, Jamie. Thanks for having me.
So I was looking through my notes. I started kind of following you on TikTok. I noticed last July. I thought that seems like a fun person, and I like what she's saying, and I like what you're doing. And then as I kind of kicked off my podcast for 2024, you're at the top of the list to reach out to, and so thanks for agreeing to this. So you've now been retired, I think, right about 2 years, right? So fill us in on the transition.
Yeah, it was 2 years as of December 31st.
Okay.
Yeah, it wasn't at all what I expected at first. I thought it was going to be these years, decades long vacation. But as you know, every vacation has a low point.
Yep.
And it could be travel delays, traffic, the Airbnb isn't what you thought, the whole thing.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what happened to me. It wasn't necessarily what I thought. I spent my whole career, working for Fidelity Investments and helping people prepare financially for retirement, but never spent a lot of time on the, sort of the emotional side, and even like the physical side and what I was going to do with my time. I just thought it was going to be all like fun and games. And, but I was just so tied up in my corporate career. I didn't have a lot of time. And so I kind of sunk deep
Yeah.
when I first retired.
So that was kind of right after, they're kind of in those first months and that first season right after you left Fidelity. So go through the last couple of years, and we'll kind of talk about ebb and flow and some of those things. But where are you today? Where do you feel like you are today in that transition?
Yeah, I would say, it's been 2 years. For me, it was like almost the first 14 months that were really tough. And there were obviously periods in there, the summertime was better than the winter time, that kind of thing. But, and it sort of just unfolded for me. At first it was like, I didn't get out of bed until like 9:30. And then I thought that was what I wanted. But then by noon, I felt horrible because I had done nothing with my day. And so that kind of wove into like, I didn't have a purpose to get up. And when you don't have a purpose, you just kind of I felt like sort of a waste. I was wasting my life away. And then I didn't have structure. So there was no I didn't have a purpose. There's no structure. So those were two of the problems. The other was I had lost all of my community. I worked so much and traveled so much. Most of my network that I had that was current was through work. So that was gone. I had no hobbies because I worked so much. And so all of a sudden, these things started unfolding over the first 6 months of I have no purpose, I have no structure, I have no hobbies, I have no community. Like these are things that, there's books written on, but, I didn't read any of the books ahead of time. And when people ask you, there's no one to talk to about it. Because when people ask you, how's retirement? Everyone wants you to say, oh, it's wonderful. I love it.
Yeah.
Nobody who's still working wants to hear that you're struggling, and they don't feel bad for you. They give you the little violin symbol.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So it took me a while, and slowly I started. It's not like I woke up one day and was like, okay, I'm going to do that, figure out how to solve for all of these.
Yeah.
But slowly I just started creating structure, creating purpose. And I really just started with what are the activities that make me happy? And if I'm doing it and I don't enjoy it, then I should stop doing it, because I just needed to figure out who I was without the job.
Yeah. My friend and personal coach for a while, a guy named Bob Goff, he talks about quitting Thursdays. And so he kind of goes through and kind of puts his list of all these things he's involved in. And it could be something simple, it could be something big, but he does take stock of that on a regular basis and go, I'm going to quit something today. And I've tried it, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't for me. But I think that idea that you're in this place, maybe for the first time in your life, where you to go, I don't want to do that anymore. And I don't have to. I'm not responsible to anybody. I can just stop doing that. I don't get enjoyment out of it. So
That's right.
Good for you. So you're with Fidelity, who, as I told you ahead of time, I just think the world of Fidelity. We've used them for our 401k for many, many years, and been to several of their sites. It's such an impressive organization. And you were a spokesman. I saw you on well-known newscasts many times, talking about savings for people, and that was where you spent your life, helping people financially retire. And so they came along, you're at this place, and you're really only in your mid-50s, and they say, hey, we have an option for you to take off. How did you know you were ready? Or maybe it's better to say, why did you think you were ready to go ahead and take it?
Well, I had spent, most of my career at Fidelity, but I have worked at other places previous to that. So I'd been about 30 years in corporate. And, when you love your job, it doesn't feel like work, right? You never work a day. But I would say after COVID, being on Zoom, I had, when I was working pre-COVID, really long commutes. And, I didn't want to go back to that. I was kind of burnt out. And deep down, I think I realized that I had kind of lost myself in the process. Being a mother, a daughter, both my parents have, passed away. My mother in my 40s and my dad right as I was turning 50. And so, I was 54 when I retired. They offered this buyout. It was an early retirement package. And if your age and tenure equaled a certain age, you were eligible, and they lowered the age. And so I was eligible. And I just thought, I'm young enough, having had worked there and in financial services for so long, and I climbed the ladder. So I had, relatively enough to retire. And so I thought, this is an opportunity for me to reinvent myself. When my parents retired, my mom got cancer just a couple of years later, so they never got to enjoy it. And so I just thought, I want to figure out who I am outside of this corporate life, reinvent myself, and do other things, and kind of see what I'm made of outside of the corporate structure.
I can't remember where I read it or who wrote it, talked about, I think it might have been Richard Leiter, and he'd written so much great stuff about purpose. And he talks about that transition from having our identity as this corporate Fidelity spokesperson, to it goes away. And so many of us, it's super tempting to spend the rest of our life saying, what do you do? Well, I used to be Fidelity. I used to be a lawyer. I used to be a, maintenance person, whatever it is. And so we had that identity, and so we often go back and still identify ourselves in that way. How has it been for you to let go of that identity, and what has that process looked like, and what's the new identity?
So I'm still working on the new identity.
Okay, all right. We'll
But
come back to
I
that.
think it's an evolution, right? It evolves over time. It was hard. I mean, and I didn't anticipate it. I actually didn't think, I'm not like, even though I was a senior vice president, I wasn't your typical, I definitely was corporate, but I wasn't as maybe, I tried to avoid corporate speak and things like that. So I wasn't as typical as you might see. And so I didn't anticipate it. And it really was, trying to figure out, well, who am I? I was a wife and a mother and a sister and a daughter and a friend and an aunt and all of these things. But beyond that, like who was I at my core? And so that took a while for me to kind of rebuild like my identity. And I, now I can say, okay, I'm a TikToker, I'll do podcasts, I do all these things. But I think it was some of figuring out like who you are, is figuring out what you enjoy and how you like to spend your time. Because I think, words, I could say I'm anything, right? But my actions and where I spend my time is what really defines you and your values. And so I do think for me, it was about figuring out what I liked and didn't like. I never asked myself what I liked. I just went to work. I did my job. I took care of my kids. I was a good wife. I took care of my aging parents. There wasn't a lot of, well, what do you want to do? It was like, it was more like, what are you going to do for me?
Yeah.
And so taking that step back, I think, because right now I can say, oh yeah, I'm a pickleballer, I'm a TikToker, but even those things, I think it's just realizing and finding that space of, I'm a person that wants to have a positive impact in the world. I want to help other people with things that I've struggled with. If I can reduce some of their pain and angst and going through some of the things I went through, that's kind of who I want to be and what I want to give back to the world while I can.
Yeah, that's honorable. That's awesome. So you started doing that. I'm not quite sure where that still stands today. You trademarked the embracing work-life sway, and it's a great story how you plotted kind of your life. You look back on your life, you plotted your life, you plotted it with markets, you plotted it with career, and saw how they interwove. And when I look back on at least when you quit, tracking it, they at least were all up. But is that something that you are still involved in? Do you still coach that in any way? But tell us about that first of all, and then what are you doing with that today?
Yeah, that all evolved. So it's interesting. I mean, I always struggled with work-life balance when I was working. I had 2 kids and I worked, my husband worked. We're trying to balance everything. My mom had cancer. And after she died, I thought I really reflected on work-life balance. And to me, it was kind of a fail, right? I mean, you can't, to remain balanced, you have to be perfectly still. And like my life wasn't still. And so I started thinking about, life has so many up and downs. When I was in my 20s, I thought it was going to be this linear upward trajectory, and that is like far from that. And so I wanted to plot out my life. So I kind of took a trend line in Excel and plotted out my life. And I said, let me see how my career overlays, because my career wasn't linear either. There was lateral and setbacks and things like that. And as I looked at these historical, trend lines, it reminded me of the stock market. So I said, oh, why don't I overlay the Dow Jones on my life and my career? And I thought, at life, there is sway, just like when you think of palm trees or the market, they go back and forth, they're up and down. And just like a palm tree, in life, you get these hurricanes and the palm tree is flexible and resilient and it gets stronger after. And I feel like sort of a metaphor for life that, you do need to be flexible, you do need to be resilient, and what doesn't kill you, as they say, makes you stronger. And so I just started to really think about how the market, they say life imitates art, but it's really the stock market to me that imitates life. And there's all these asset management principles that really help people, balance their portfolio. And that's where I got this idea of that your life is like this portfolio, your life is a portfolio. And rather than trying to balance it, we should manage it, by understanding the risks and having diversification and thinking about time is the asset in this equation, not money, and where we invest our time really says a lot about what sort of return we're going to get. And so anyway, yeah, so I'm working on a book. It's been a years long process. I realized I like writing, not editing. And so it's still in the editing process, but hopefully sometime in 2024.
Well, we'll get you back on when it comes out, and when we'll promote that again. I think there's just these times in our life where we have to give ourselves grace that it's not in balance. We just, you got to go on the crazy season for work, that for whatever ebb and flow work creates, and then sometimes it's all about kids, and sometimes it's all about taking care of your parents. And when our is a bellwether, whenever our marker is, it's got to be in balance, and
That's
kind of
right.
beat ourselves up over that. I wrote about a half a book one time, and I called it Strategic Imbalance. And the
Mm,
concept behind it was looking at all these people who had been so successful, and that we all admired for their areas of success. And it was, in sports and finance and the arts, and just realizing when I looked at their lives, how crazy out of balance they were. But because they were out of balance, they accomplished so much, and we got to
yes.
appreciate what they did. But yeah, it was, when I look back, unfortunately, like half of the people have imploded that were on it. It's Lance Armstrong, Bill Gates,
Mm,
Tiger Woods. These are all these people that are on there, and others have fared much better. But it's not. Goal is not to be in balance. We have to choose, and I think if we're really going to sort of accomplish something hugely significant that the world pays attention to, our life is probably going to get out of whack for a while,
that's right.
and we're going to have to be focused on it.
Yeah. I
So somewhere along the way you went, hey, I'm in my 50s. I want to go down the TikTok path, right? And I think that's the time when you were recording them was kind of hitting my sweet spot in finishing strong, where you would start off and say, if you're recently retired or thinking of retiring, you need to hear this. And then you
mhm.
would kind of dot, dot, dot. So what are, after doing that for a while, and you've done a variety of other things which have been super good, and I'm going to come to one or two of those in a minute, but what are a handful of things we need to hear?
About retirement.
Yeah, if you're recently retired or thinking of retiring, you need to hear this. What would be a handful of those things that you're anchored that people need to hear before they retire, or if they just recently retired?
I would say the first is to give yourself grace.
Mhm.
GYG, right? Give yourself grace, because you if you've never not worked, and you've worked since you're in your 20s, and now you're in your 50s or 60s, you can't even imagine what it's going to be like. Some people love it and they never look back. But if you're someone that doesn't love it, give yourself grace, give it time, and start to focus on finding the purpose and the structure and the community and all of that, and it will
Mhm.
start to take care of itself. I would also say, it's not the end all be all. Like, if you're not quite financially ready to retire and all you think about is retirement because you hate your job, maybe look for a new job. And I
Yeah,
know that's not
right.
that easy, especially as you get older and there's ageism and things like that in the workplace. But,
Yeah.
I do think that, you know, if you're not happy in your job, there are other opportunities out there, and maybe it's not in the same capacity, maybe it's not in the same field, but I do believe you're never too old to reinvent yourself. And so I would think about that too if you're not quite ready to retire. I think the third and probably final thing I would say, is that, it's a journey, and you may think you want it. And I had so many people comment on the TikTok that said, I tried retirement and I was retired for 2 or 3 years and I hated it. And I went back to work and I've never been happier. And so I think that there's no right answer. I think it's different for everyone, and that's okay. Like, life is different for everyone. Everyone has different challenges, different financial situations, different things that they like and don't like. And so I just think, try it, see if you like it. If you don't, that's okay. Like, there's nothing to be embarrassed or shame. I mean, I had so many people comment about, how do you hate it? What's wrong with you? I can't wait to retire. There's nothing wrong. I
Hmm.
mean, everyone is
Yeah.
different. And so I think, what underpins everything I just said is you got to find your own path. And, the haters are going to hate. Like, that's life. And so, you got to do what you want and what's best for you and your family and your friends and all of that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. I've had this, I feel like I've kind of unretired before I've retired here over the last year. Our company sold. in May, and fortunately they wanted to keep the entire management team, and actually all the employees. So it was great. We just got a new board, which is fantastic. So when we first sold, it's like, I think I want to retire at the end of the year. That's a good date.
Yeah.
December 31st, 2023, I'm done. And then I got into it a few months, and it's like, there's some things I want to do, and I feel like we're rushing things. And so then I made a deal that said, how about May of 2024? Okay, we got that, May of 2024. And so went down that path for a few months, and then I got to the end of the year and went, I don't know if I'm ready yet. And so I went back to the CEO and I said, what do you think about like a part-time, not a part-time, I don't want to be part-time. I think part-time is a tough place to be, but
Yeah.
how about if we can do a deal where I'm full-time, but I just get more time off? That's really what I want in this season, is I want a little more time off. And so that's the deal on the table right now. And so it looks like in May I'll transition and kind of go to about a 75% time. And so it's full time, but I'm working less. And so kind of keep the same role, keep the same, position, and yet have less time. So I'm super looking forward to that. I feel like I've died and gone to heaven to have
That's
matched
awesome.
up that combination of things. And so many people I see are wanting something, but
Yes.
they're in this place of they had a pretty cool job. And now like, maybe I'll just go work at Home Depot for. And my scream was like, no, don't just occupy time, right? Find something that you really love to do, and do that. Who cares if you make
Yes.
money at it, right? But
Yeah.
go use what the gifts and talents God's given you to go do something else and make
That's
a
right.
difference in the world. You talked about, and you've actually mentioned one of these, kind of the get to the other side in this retirement piece. And so you talked about giving yourself grace. And I think that's a huge piece as we start to enter into it, as we begin and give ourselves grace in the different seasons and things we'll go through. Then you talked about a couple other things. Communicate with family and friends. What's your encouragement on how that communication can look?
I think when you retire, communicate how you're feeling. Like, I think a lot of people, I don't think they intend to lie purposely, but they're like, no, it's great. I have a few friends, there's a lot of us that all took this package at the same time.
Yeah.
And, the acquaintances, when you talk to them, everything's great, but there's a few of us that really struggled, and sort of having that open communication and knowing that you're not alone, or letting your spouse or partner or your kids know that you're struggling. And the irony is, you talked about TikTok. The reason I went on TikTok, I made that video actually for my first TikTok for LinkedIn. And I thought,
okay.
I'm writing this book, let me talk about it. And my daughter was like, Mom, put it on TikTok. You should be a TikTok. She's like, I think you'd be great on TikTok. And so she knew I was kind of struggling to find like my purpose. And even though, she's my daughter, she was 22 at the time, I was like, you know what? I got nothing to lose. And so there is something that you don't have anything to lose, and communicating and talking to your friends and family can really help provide the support. And maybe, when you're directionless, they can provide some direction, even if they're younger. And so I think just having that open dialogue is, and I feel like today people do much more than when I was a kid, but I do think that was one thing that really did help me.
Yeah, that was great. And it's you have the contagious enthusiasm on there. So can you how many followers do you have on TikTok? Do you know? Does it tell you how many people subscribe to you?
So yeah, it tells you. And that first video got 80,000 views, which
What?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome.
On TikTok. And then I did decide to put it on LinkedIn. And then out of that, I posted on LinkedIn, and I got a part-time consulting job out of that, which was kind of nice. So that one video really worked hard for me. I would say, I'm sort of intermittent now. I have about 23,000 followers, which when you think about some of these big influencers, it's not that many, but and it kind of stagnant. I was really active over the summer, and through the fall, I got busy. And then the winter, I just did a whole bunch. We went to Asia for 3 weeks. And so I did a whole series of videos on that. But I'm not as active as I used to be. I have to get back out there. So the more active and the more advice, or guidance I give, the more followers you pick up. So I'm sort of taking a break, as they say.
Yeah. Well, that's great. And it's good to know that I mean, I can't say our age because I'm 10 years ahead of you, but I think the people over 50 that to know that they are looking at TikTok, because it's most of the stuff says this demographic is gonna maybe look at Facebook. We don't look at Instagram unless it's our kids or grandkids or something. So it's great to know that you've kind of cracked a little bit of the nut on people over 50 who are following that. Either that or you've got really popular kids and they're all passing around to your kids' friends and they're the ones who are watching it here. I don't know.
I can see the demographics. 80% on some of the videos, 80% are over 55. A lot of them are over 45.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. That's good.
Follow me. Yeah.
So the third thing you talked about getting to the other side, talk about giving yourself grace, communicate. Then you talk about connecting with other people, kind of putting yourself out there in connection. How do you connect with people today? What does that look like in your life?
I would say when I retired, most of my friends in my community that were current were from work, and we were sort of distributed all over the country. And I didn't really have a community. Like, I had my friends from college and high school and friends, from when my kids were little, but we moved a bunch. So I didn't have much of a community. And so we have a place down in Florida, and, here that we live in a big development, and, at first it was kind of hard. Like, and I did a video on that. It's hard to make friends as an adult. Like, when you have small kids or you're working, you bond over a project you're on together, or you bond over the kids that are the same age. And so as an adult, it's like, what do you bond over? And that's where the hobby thing came in. I had no hobbies. And so, now today I'm out playing pickleball. So I have pickleball friends, and I'm on TikTok. So I literally have TikTok friends. And so I have different friends, and I'm trying to get back into weightlifting. So I have friends from like the gym. And so having hobbies, it's not just something to quote, fill your time and keep you busy, but it should be a meaningful pursuit. But that's also something where you can connect with other people and share stories and ideas. Like, with pickleball, it's all physical. With TikTok, it's like, oh, how many followers? How do you do this? Did you struggle with this? I do this. So you have something that kind of binds the relationship. And so that's where I do think, people that are looking to find friends, putting yourself out there into hobbies. And even if it's a hobby like a TikTok, you think you're just one person, but there are ways to connect with other people that are interested in the same thing, whether it's on Reddit or, there's Facebook groups and all of that. There's just different ways. But I think it's really the community that you build really goes hand in hand with how you spend your time.
Yeah. Well, good for you. Good for you for leaning into that, because it's so easy to. One of the biggest risks that I've seen, especially for men in this season, is isolating.
Yes.
And it just leads to nothing good. There's nothing good at isolating, and the stats for men isolating, then leading to depression, to lead to all kinds of other things, and too much of lots of things is just a prescription for disaster. So I certainly support, and we do in Finishing Strong, that the pillar of the importance of community that we just got to have in this season. So how do you look at today, this week? This is a Monday of a week. How do you structure your days now with this? What is your structure? You for so long you had a structure that got up, then you went to the other side and went, I'm going to sleep in all day, and now you're somewhere in between. So how do you structure your days generally, and what is there sort of a pattern that you could share with us?
For me, it all starts in the morning. And it's funny. Yeah, I was sleeping until 9:30. That was a terrible idea. Then I started getting up at 7, then I started getting up at 6. Now, most days I get up at 5. And I might lay in bed for a half an hour, but I get up at 5 so I can do that. But then I get up, I usually work out, I lift weights because, you got to keep your bones strong and all that muscle. And then I play pickleball probably 5 or 6 days a week from 7 to 8 a.m. So I'll work out, I'll stretch, I'll go play pickleball, and then I get back at 8. And then I feel like, okay, I've at least checked off the box on the exercise for the day. but then I can come back, I have coffee, I read emails. Then I'll usually, probably from about 10 a.m. to like 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, I'm either working on my consulting, I'll be making TikToks, working on I sort of have like work time or things where I'm focused on, you know, kind of doing work for the world or whatever it is, answering emails, doing, and then in the late afternoon, I'll either do errands or, go out to dinner, meet a friend. I mean, I try to box the time that I'm quote, working on things, because I never want to get out of balance like I was. I mean, I was just working and commuting and I didn't have a life outside of that. And I am like steadfast in that will never happen again.
Yeah. Well, that's good. That's it's great to hear that. And I think in terms of compartments or blocks or sections, so that's really helpful for me to hear. So you said something. This kind of goes back to your expertise. You said, okay, I something like, I thought I had enough to retire on, or I think I do, or whatever it is. So all the world and all the time you spent in helping people to save and plan and put it away, and whether it's 401k or all kinds of other places to invest, the question so often, and it's the one area I don't touch in the Finishing Strong workshops, because I think there's people like you who are much better equipped to talk to people about that. But how do you know enough is enough? Right. That's the question that people get asked in Fidelity people all the time. How do you know I've got enough? Now that you've kind of talked about one of the things you lose in retirement is the paycheck. You look back and well, hindsight, how do you know it's enough?
Well, on some hand, you can be like, it's never enough, you always need more.
Yeah.
But what it comes down to, what I realized in planning for retirement, actually living in retirement, well, a couple of things. One, I don't like spending my savings. You accumulate and you accumulate and you accumulate. Now to spend that down can be really difficult, especially, I retired in December of 2021. So 2022, the stock market tanked. Right. And I don't have a pension plan. So this is all like savings. And so watching the stock market go down was like excruciating. It was really not fun. But I will say, using all the different tools, and I've had friends that have sent me actuarial spreadsheets and modeling all of this, it really comes down to how much you spend. So, for example, if you say you have, $500,000 saved for retirement, but you spend $200,000 a year, like it's not going to last.
A short retirement, right?
Exactly. But if you have 500,000 saved for retirement and you can live on $25,000 a year, it's a different story.
Sure.
So a lot of it, and trust me, the best advice I can give is go into all the planning tools. All of the financial services companies have retirement calculators, but if you put in the amount that you have or you think you're going to have, and then you change how much you spend every year, you'll be amazed at the difference that a small change in your spending rate can give you years back of your retirement. And so I do think one of the things when people are thinking about retirement, you hear a lot of people downsizing and lifestyle, but that really, really does play a role in how much is enough. So that's my best answer to that question, because it's so personal, right?
Yeah.
Everyone wants a different lifestyle and people can accept different things in terms of housing and cars and all of that. So there's no one size fits all.
Have you been able to dial back at least a little on the burn rate that you had prior to going into retirement?
Oh yeah. Oh my gosh. Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, and some of it helps that my kids are out of college now, and they're both working and financially independent. I mean, having kids still on your quote payroll, that can be a big financial drain. But yeah, I mean, because now I have more time, so more, we would get takeout a lot, eat out. I don't do a lot of that now because we have more time to cook. And so there's things that I used to kind of quote throw money at the problem, where now I can take care of myself because I have the time and the interest, and so it hasn't been as painful as you might think.
Yeah. So based on what you know today, and then the final question, what's Jeannie Thompson going to be doing 5 years from now?
That's a great question. It's kind of an evolution. I definitely will probably still be on TikTok. I am thinking about taking my book around becoming the portfolio manager of your life. I wrote it mostly for working people, but creating a retirement version. How do you structure your retirement life? I do think this topic of retirement is something that would be quite passionate about for a long time. So it'll be something there. I'm
Well,
not
great.
exactly sure what.
Well, we'll be journeying on that from different ends of the country together.
That's
So
right.
it'd be fun to cheer you along, and for sure, once the book comes out, I hope you'll come back and join us and tell us more about it, where people can get in touch with you. And of course, on your what is your website that people can find you on now for the consulting?
Oh yeah, JeannieThompson.com
Okay.
or on TikTok at JDawg retires.
Love that. Love that handle. All right, Jeannie. Well, thanks so much for joining me and finishing strong. We appreciate it. We'll look forward to seeing you again.
Sounds great. Thanks so much, Jamie.
Thank you for joining another Finishing Strong podcast today. You can learn more about Jeannie in our show notes. We've provided some links to her website, which is simply JeannieThompson.com. We're going to keep following Jeannie as she finishes out her book, Work Life Sway, and cheer her on. And we look forward to having her come back and join us for another show sometime. You can also learn more about us at www.finishing-strong.org, where you can register for one of our upcoming events as soon as we get one scheduled, or sign up for a retirement coaching session with me. Have a great day. Thanks.